What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the new best fire warrior build in Path of Exile 2 0.3 update. This setup is all about turning your warrior into a walking volcano by scaling ignite from massive slams and leaving entire packs of enemies burning in your footsteps. If you ever wanted a build that feels heavy, brutal and explosive all at once, then this is it. The heart of this build comes from three key skills: volcanic fissure, the forge hammer and the stampede. Volcanic fissure splits the ground open in a wave of lava, then the forge hammer lands a crashing blow that ignites even the tankiest targets, and stampede finishes off by making every step you take rip the battlefield apart. Together they will give you an unmatched clear speed and boss damage that melts targets. What makes the build shine is setting enemies on fire. Because ignite scales up the size of your hit, every massive slam you land will translate into a burn that continues to deal damage for several seconds. That means your forge hammer or the volcanic fissure is just not one hit. It's essentially gets stretched over several times, and the bigger impact, the bigger the burn. The bosses that might usually take ages to grind down will start melting away as you rotate through the skills. And another important thing to know is that while many melee builds were slowed down by the armor explosion nerf this patch, the fire Warmbringer is still OP. Ignite scaling was not affected by those changes, which makes the setup stand out as most consistent and rewarding warrior build in the game right now. It's super strong for mapping, devastating for bosses, and it feels smooth for the leveling all the way into the red maps. And remember, if you wanna track this build, look up the best items, the skill trees and path of building, then check my link in the description. If you ever played Path of Exile 2 for long enough, then you know that the grind for currency can feel endless. And that's where today's sponsor comes in. SkyCoach is a trusted platform used by over 150,000 gamers worldwide. They offer pro player support in more than top 25 games, including POE 2. No matter if you need a faster start, you wanna help with the tough content or just want currency delivered safely and quickly, then SkyCoach has you covered. What I really like is how smooth the whole process is, from click to the gameplay in minutes, clear and fast chats with their team, plus if an order is not fulfilled you get an instant refund. I've tried it myself and honestly it just makes the game more fun. So if you wanna skip the grind and enjoy POV2 your way, then click my link in the description to check out SkyCoach and use my code KATE for extra 10% off. So let's break down the skill gems, and your main clearing tool is the Stampede. And honestly, this is one of the most fun melee skills in Path of Exile 2. Every step you take will proc fissures under your feet, and once you've linked it with the supports like the crater and the branching fissures, it turns into a chain reaction of eruptions that wipe out monsters without you even needing to stop moving. The mapping feels incredible with this skill, because you're literally killing while stripping through the zones. For single target you've got a rotation that feels deliberate and powerful, and against rares or bosses you will start with Infernal Cry if you have access to it, because that weakens enemies and primes them for explosions. Then you slam them with the Forge Hammer, following up by the Volcanic Fissure, and finally you pop Ancestral Cry to boost your exerted attacks. From there we transition into the Stampede until the targets burn down. If you don't have the Ancestral Cry yet, then you can simply rely on the Infernal Cry to fill that slot, and you will see huge ignite damage rolling over time. Especially for tanky bosses, dropping a War Banner before you start your rotation will add that extra push you need. And one quick tip here, keep your War Banner at a low level. Leveling it up increases dexterity requirements without giving you much more power, so you actually save yourself some stat headaches by leaving it underleveled. It's still incredibly effective, but you don't need to overcommit points into dexterity just to keep it online. Then for supports, the first place that you want to invest your quality is the Stampede, since that's your main clearing skill and it scales beautifully with the early investment. When it comes to the Jevels, there are two things to look out for. The new unique The Jevel Heart of the Will is a game changer by giving you both maximum life on a kill and extra fire damage. Then for rare Jevels, aim for stats like the added rage on a hit, increased damage against enemies with the broken armor, and even the block chance for survival. These will scale your damage while also shoring up defenses, which is the perfect balance for a melee fire build. Then next up we have the passive tree, and you want to start at this section and move into the clusters that emphasize melee damage, slam effectiveness and the Warcry synergies. Since Ignite is our main damage source, so we prioritize the fire multipliers and burning damage nodes, making sure that every big hit we land translates into the sustained burning. Then physical to elemental conversion nodes are also key here, since they let us turn the raw strength into devastating fire output. Defenses are built directly into the progression, so maximum life scaling is everywhere, combined with strong investments in into the armor and endurance charges. Endurance charges aren't just for defenses, they also tie into the Warbringer synergies and empower your exerted attacks. This keeps you both tanky enough to stay in the melee range and consistent enough to deliver empowered blows every few seconds. The Warcry nodes are another cornerstone of the tree. The cooldown reduction and exerted attack bonus are critical, since our whole single target rotation relies on weaving the Warcry into the slams. By reducing cooldowns and increasing their effect, we make sure that our infernal and ancestral cries are always ready when we need them. There's also room here for scaling AoV, which feels fantastic with the skills like the volcanic fissure. Bigger coverage here mean faster map clearing, but it also ensures that your slams reliably ignite every enemy in a pack. Then now let's talk about the Ascendancy. As the name suggests, we are going full into the Warbringer, and the order that you pick your points will matter a lot. So first up is the Anvil's Weight. This gives your slams incredible upfront impact, by turning even your early game hits into the chunks of damage that feel significant. Then from there we move into the Renly's Raining, which buffs your Warcries and makes your exerted attacks much stronger. This is where the synergy with the Forge Hammer and the Volcanic Fissure will really start to shine. Then third, grab the Jade Heritage, which layers extra survivability onto the build, by scaling armor and endurance effectiveness. This keeps you sturdy while you're deep into the melee combat. And finally, round this out with the Turtle Charm, which adds another layer of the damage reduction for the big incoming hits. Combining these 4 nodes will give you the perfect balance of the raw damage, ignite scaling, Warcry synergy and defenses. Next, let's shift gears and let's talk about the Atlas passive tree, because this is the place where you define your endgame grind. The Fire Warrior build will thrive in content with a high density, so we're going to lean hard into that. Into the center of the Atlas you will invest into the Essence, Harvest and the Strong boxes, as well as Delirium. Essence will give you reliable crafting materials, then Harvest will provide deterministic upgrades, and Strong boxes plus Delirium will crank the monster density through the roof. And that's exactly what this build wants. More monsters, more ignites, and more explosions. On the right side, we will path into the Legion and Expedition. Both of these will add massive packs of enemies, and nothing feels better than stampeding through an entire pack of Expedition camp and watching every enemy ignite at once. And finally, we invest in the top of the tree here for the bossing nodes. These increase our frequency and the quality of the Conqueror, Maven and the Shaper, or even the Elder, by giving you consistent access to the endgame bosses without having to respec. The main idea of this build here is to focus. Instead of spreading too thin across every mechanic, you're clustering around synergies that give you consistent loot, reliable crafting resources, and a massive monster density. That way, no matter if you're farming currency, pushing maps, or even tackling bosses, your Atlas tree is always working with your build and not against it. The next up we have gear, and first and foremost you wanna cap your resistances. The fire, cold and lightning will need to hit at least 75% mark, because without it you're going to get deleted in the red maps. For your main weapon hand you wanna aim for the Solemn Maul. It is the perfect two-handed base for scaling those big ignite triggering hits. Then helmets like the Mask Great Helm, and body armor like the Warlord Curry Russ will provide the strength, spirit and resistances that you need, while the Bulwark Greaves will round out your defenses. Then for your offhand, the Swell and Shield is absolutely critical. It adds survivability, the block chance, and synergizes perfectly with defensive layers of this build. Then for rings we should get the Amethyst Ring for resistances and damage scaling. Then for gloves get the Valmids and the Rawhide Belt to provide that extra melee scaling, fire damage and the maximum life. Then on the amulet slot you wanna get the Gold Amulet, and make sure that you've got at least plus 35 Spirit Summer on your gear, so either way here or on your body armor. This one is required if you want your build to run smoothly. Then for affixes you want to prioritize physical damage converted to fire, added fire damage, melee skill scaling, maximum life and the strength. On top of that you will want the Soul Core of the Testari rune on your gear and iron runes on your weapons. These will push your damage into overdrive while keeping the defense very high. And finally, don't neglect the Jevels. At the heart of the Vel Jevel is the best end slot for sustain and the fire scaling, but rare Jevels with the rage on hit, fire multipliers and the block chance are just as valuable for rounding out your setup. And now finally, let's see how to actually play this build. The flow is straightforward but incredibly satisfying. For clearing, you will rely almost entirely on the stampede. Every footstep procs the fissures that ripple through the packs, and once you've got your supports online, you're basically erasing screens just by moving. And then for stragglers or tough rares, you can use the Forge Hammer or the Volcanic Fissure to finish them off. Then for single target, you will shift into a very controlled rotation. If you got Ancestral Cry, then your opener is Infernal Cry to weaken the enemies, followed by the Forge Hammer, then the Volcanic Fissure, then the Ancestral Cry to empower your extended attacks, and after that it's all about the Stampede, until the target is dead. However, on the other hand, if you don't have that Ancestral Cry yet, then just stick with the Infernal Cry and the rotation still works. And then lastly, a quick tip: when you're facing especially tanky bosses, dropping a War Banner before you start will add a serious DPS boost.